an uncomfortable truth that World War II historians don't like to admit. It's the enormous number of casualties caused by friendly fire among the bombers of the time. The casualties from friendly fire were really numerous enough to be concerning. But despite this, the tactics of the bombers didn't change much during the conflict, at least not to solve this problem. In this video, we will observe how common these unfortunate cases were, why it happened so much, and why nothing notable was ever done to change the situation. So get comfortable. My name is Kevin Aguilar, and this is Guns Club. Towards the middle and end stages of World War II, the bomber was the ultimate weapon to weaken the enemy in many ways beyond the battlefield. The German industry and infrastructure were the main targets of these huge flying weapons. However, as you may also know, German anti-aircraft defenses were extremely sophisticated, forcing bombers to operate at really high altitudes to be able to dodge anti-aircraft guns and enemy interceptors. This greatly reduced the bombers' accuracy, causing when targets were attacked, the dispersion of the bombs caused little damage to the infrastructure, even destroying unwanted areas like cities. This is why tight bomber formations emerged. If everyone dropped their bombs in a coordinated manner in a tight formation, the bombs were concentrated in a small area, greatly increasing the damage to the target. These formations also had other purposes that you probably wouldn't believe, such as reducing pilot fatigue. In one of these formations, you could simply guide yourself by your group without being very aware of where you are and your altitude. So it was almost like flying on autopilot. And finally, the protection of the bombers. Paradoxically, being in a tight group of bombers increased their ability to defend themselves despite being detected more. Simply as I said, the formations were changing. However, by 1944, they were managing one in a box of 36 bombers each. Large missions could involve multiple formations advancing side by side to reach the objective. There were many measures in place to avoid both friendly fire and self-inflicted fire, as the maximum range of the defensive 50 caliber machine guns was 6 kilometers. The formations were at a distance of 6.5 or 7 kilometers away to avoid stray bullets from other formations. Also, some bombers like the B-17s and the B-24s had switches in the turrets to avoid shooting their own plane, protecting the propellers and engines of the plane. Similarly, the waist gunners could not shoot at the tail of the plane because of the angle at which they were shooting. Also, practices to avoid friendly fire were seen from the gunners' own training. As we can see in this document, the training of the gunners emphasized quite a bit on aircraft recognition and aiming. Moreover, German aircraft camouflage was not very similar to American ones in 1944. Taking into account all these factors, friendly fire among bombers should have been minimal or almost anecdotal. However, it existed, and in fact, in alarming quantities. Documents from all impact studies of more than 25,000 bombers that returned home between January and May of 1944 confirm a pattern. As we can see, the main damage among the bombers was caused by shots from the anti-aircraft flags, a fact that is not surprising since by 1944 they were really sophisticated and extremely common weapons. Rocketry and calibers greater than 20 accounted for only 0.1% of the recorded impacts of those who returned home. But the most interesting thing about this document is what we see in the center of it. The damage received from friendly fire, which includes damage received from unknown machine guns, from friendly fire, and also from self-inflicted damage. The percentage of this type of damage in planes returning home was extremely small. Only 1.6% of the damage is confirmed to be from friendly fire, which is relatively low. But we must take into account that this document studies the planes that did return home, so we should look at these documents in a different way. For example, flak damages are less effective, as the damages received were perfectly resisted by the bombers and they managed to return home, while the damages received from cannons greater than 20 millimeters in caliber and rocketry were much more lethal. Therefore, it was much rarer to see damages of this type among the bombers that returned home. So this document is only referential and not conclusive regarding friendly fire. However, as we can see, it was something that happened almost as regularly as receiving a high-caliber shot. Other documents state that when enemy opposition was large, friendly fire could increase up to 20% of the damage received from machine gun fire. Indeed, that's quite a lot. And it also tells us something very interesting, that generally those damages were received on the plane's horizontal stabilizers, which was the main point of damage, from friendly fire and self-inflicted. So in days of intense bombing, out of every 100 bombers shot down, at least 20 of them received a considerable amount of friendly fire, and several of these would be shot down due to causes related to friendly fire. That's quite a lot now. If the situation with friendly fire, with the bombers, was like this, now imagine what it was like with the escort fighters that surrounded these bombers. Contrary to what you might think, friendly fire among the escorts was really low in ideal situations. As we mentioned before, in the training of the gunners, they were taught to quickly identify friends and enemies in the air. But in night bombing operations, things changed quite a bit. At night, it was popularly said that the most dangerous were your own companions, and it was not a lie. Although they are anecdotal data, friendly fire at night was really common. Identification was difficult when, literally, you saw nothing more than objects in the distance reflecting the light of the moon. However, on night missions, gunners were given the order to fire at specific targets. When operating at low altitude, they were told to shoot at reflectors or, for example, at confirmed targets on the ground. Only in this way to avoid attacking the escorts in the air and let them take care of the task of destroying the enemy interceptors during the day. There were other tactics, such as the invasion stripes that were used on D-Day so that Allied planes could identify each other. Since the air battle was expected to be extremely dense, quick identification of friend and foe was very important. That's why the planes carried these black and white stripes, which were definitely very distinctive and impossible to confuse during the day. Unfortunately, there isn't much data on friendly fire against escorts, so we can't draw as precise conclusions as we did with the bombers. However, friendly fire among escorts was not uncommon, and there are many pilot anecdotes and testimonies about this. Perhaps this is why we saw camouflage almost completely disappear at the beginning of 1943. To discuss more distinctively colored aircraft used for quick identification by both the Allies and the Axis powers. We've discussed this extensively in multiple videos, which I recommend to you. Friendly fire among bombers was a bit low, but considerably important enough to pay attention to. However, aggressive measures were never applied to solve this problem. This is because the tactics of tight formations were really effective, and this effectiveness made friendly fire a really tolerable problem. If you're interested in bombers, you'd probably like to know the story of the B-17 gunner, whom the very top German leader put a bounty on for his capture. Thanks for watching this video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.